Welcome to Famous People, English Stories. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey.
Introduction. Today's story is about Queen Elizabeth II, a royal icon who led with grace and strength. Her journey of duty, resilience, and lifelong service inspired generations and left a legacy that will never fade. Chapter 1: A Princess is Born, The Early Life of Queen Elizabeth II. On a cold April day in 1926, a baby girl was born in a London townhouse. She was not born in a palace, nor was she expected to become queen one day. But life had other plans. Her name was Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor. The world would one day know her as Queen Elizabeth II. Elizabeth was born on April 21, 1926, to the Duke and Duchess of York. Her father was Prince Albert, the second son of King George V. Her mother, Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, was a member of Scottish nobility. From the start, Elizabeth was called Lilibet by close family members, a sweet nickname that stayed with her for life. As a child, Elizabeth lived a quiet and comfortable life. She was educated at home by private tutors. Her lessons included history, language, literature, and music. Even as a little girl, she showed great interest in horses and dogs. She had a calm and serious nature, but she also loved to laugh and play with her younger sister, Princess Margaret. When Elizabeth was just 10 years old, something happened that changed her life forever. Her uncle, King Edward VIII, decided to give up the throne. He wanted to marry a woman named Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. At that time, it was not allowed for a king to marry someone who had been divorced. So, King Edward chose love over duty and abdicated the throne. Elizabeth's father, Prince Albert, suddenly became King George VI. He was a shy man who never expected to be king, but he accepted the role with courage. And with that, Elizabeth became the heir to the British throne. Her life would never be the same. As the new princess, Elizabeth began to prepare for her future responsibilities. Her education now included learning about government, world affairs, and leadership. She studied the British Constitution, learned how Parliament worked, and even had private lessons with the Archbishop of Canterbury. She also began to attend public events with her parents and grew more comfortable in the spotlight. Then came World War II. In 1939, when Elizabeth was just 13 years old, Britain entered the war. Life became more difficult for everyone. Many children were sent to the countryside for safety. Elizabeth and her sister stayed at Windsor Castle, away from the bombing in London. The young princess wanted to help. At age 14, she gave her first radio broadcast to comfort children who had been separated from their families. Her calm and clear voice gave hope to many listeners. As she grew older, Elizabeth became more involved in the war effort. In 1945, at the age of 18, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, the women's branch of the British Army. She trained as a driver and mechanic. It was the first time a female member of the royal family had joined the military in that way. Elizabeth learned how to fix engines and drive army trucks. She wanted to serve, just like her people. When the war ended, the world celebrated. People hoped for a better future. Elizabeth, now a young woman, was admired for her strength and sense of duty. She had grown up during a time of great change and challenge. But she never wavered. During this time, Elizabeth also fell in love. She had met Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark when she was just 13 years old. Over the years, they exchanged letters and grew closer. Philip had served in the Royal Navy during the war. He was brave, charming, and independent. In 1947, Elizabeth and Philip announced their engagement. Many people were excited, but some were unsure. Philip came from a foreign royal family, and he had no wealth or title in Britain. But Elizabeth believed in him. She saw his loyalty, kindness, and courage. On November 20, 1947, Elizabeth and Philip were married at Westminster Abbey. It was a grand ceremony full of tradition and celebration. Crowds filled the streets of London. The nation was ready for joy after years of war. Elizabeth wore a beautiful white gown, and the whole country watched with hope and happiness. Their marriage marked the beginning of a strong and lasting partnership. Together, they would face many challenges. But for now, Elizabeth was a young princess in love, stepping into a future full of promise. In just a few short years, that future would bring a great responsibility. Elizabeth would soon wear the crown, not just as a symbol of power, but as a symbol of service, duty, and dedication to her people. And so, the story of Queen Elizabeth II truly begins. Chapter 2: The Young Queen, Elizabeth's Rise to the Throne and Early Reign. In the years after World War II, the world was changing fast. Countries were rebuilding, and people were looking toward the future. For Elizabeth, that future came sooner than she expected. In 1952, at just 25 years old, she became Queen Elizabeth II. It happened in a quiet and unexpected way. In early 1952, Elizabeth and Prince Philip were on a royal tour of the Commonwealth. They were visiting Kenya when the news came. Her father, King George VI, had died in his sleep. He had been suffering from health problems for some time, but his passing was still a shock. Elizabeth was deeply saddened by the loss of her father. But at the same time, she understood that her life had just changed forever. She was now queen. Elizabeth immediately returned to Britain. When her plane landed, she stepped off not as a princess, but as a monarch. The country was in mourning, but people also looked to Elizabeth for hope. She showed calm and strength, even in her grief. Her face was young, but her heart was already filled with responsibility. Her coronation, the formal ceremony to crown a king or queen, was held more than a year later, on June 2, 1953. It took time to prepare. The ceremony took place at Westminster Abbey, a place rich with history and tradition. It was the first coronation ever to be broadcast on television. Millions of people around the world watched from their homes. For many, it was the first time they had ever seen such a grand royal event. Elizabeth wore a crown of gold and jewels. She held a royal scepter and orb, symbols of power and duty. But behind the beautiful ceremony was a very human moment. Elizabeth was accepting a lifelong promise. She swore to serve her people for the rest of her days. And she meant it. In those early years, Queen Elizabeth faced a changing empire. The British Empire was once the largest in the world. But after the war, many countries wanted independence. India had already gained freedom in 1947. Other nations followed. The empire was becoming something new, the Commonwealth of Nations. Queen Elizabeth became the head of this new group. Instead of ruling countries, she helped connect them through friendship and shared values. Travel became a big part of her role. Elizabeth and Philip visited countries across the world. They traveled to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, South Africa, and many others. She was the first British monarch to visit many of these nations. People lined the streets to see her, waving flags and cheering. She was a symbol of stability, tradition, and hope. At home in Britain, things were also changing. The 1950s and 1960s brought big shifts in music, fashion, and culture. The country was rebuilding, and a new spirit of freedom and creativity was growing. Through it all, the Queen remained steady. She represented unity in a time of change. As Queen, Elizabeth worked with many prime ministers, starting with Winston Churchill. He had been a leader during the war and was now helping the young Queen learn the ways of leadership. Elizabeth listened carefully and respected his wisdom. Over the years, she met with each prime minister every week. These meetings were private and full of important conversation. She gave advice, asked questions, and offered insight, always staying neutral in politics, but always aware. Queen Elizabeth was also a mother. She gave birth to her first son, Prince Charles, in 1948. Then came Princess Anne in 1950. Later, she had two more sons, Prince Andrew in 1960 and Prince Edward in 1964. Being a queen and a mother was not easy. Elizabeth had many duties, and she often had to travel or attend important events. But she cared deeply about her family and did her best to balance royal life with motherhood. During this time, the Queen also faced personal challenges. Some people questioned the role of the monarchy in modern life. Others believed she should change or step aside. But Elizabeth stood firm. She believed in service and tradition. She believed that the crown was not just about power, it was about duty and devotion. Her early years on the throne were filled with growth, both for herself and for the nation. She learned how to lead with grace. She grew into her role, one day at a time. And she earned the respect of people around the world. Not because she demanded it, but because she lived with quiet strength and constant dedication. By the end of the 1960s, Queen Elizabeth II had become more than just a ruler. She had become a symbol of continuity, of courage, and of commitment. She was no longer just the young woman who had stepped off the plane in 1952. She was the Queen. Chapter 3: Storms Behind the Crown. Trials of the Queen in the 1980s and 1990s. By the 1980s, Queen Elizabeth II had been on the throne for nearly 30 years. To the world, she was a symbol of strength, tradition, and calm leadership. But behind the palace walls, the Queen faced a time of great personal and public challenges. These decades would test her patience, her family, and even the people's trust in the monarchy. One of the Queen's main roles was to keep the royal family united and respected. But in the 1980s, cracks began to show. The younger generation of royals was now growing up and living very public lives. The Queen's eldest son, Prince Charles, had married Lady Diana Spencer in 1981. The wedding was watched by over 750 million people around the world. People called it a fairy tale wedding. Diana was young, beautiful, and kind. At first, everyone believed the story was perfect. But behind the scenes, the marriage was troubled. Charles and Diana had very different personalities. They came from different worlds. Charles was quiet and traditional. Diana was warm and emotional. Their problems grew quickly. The public could sense the tension, and soon, newspapers began reporting on their private struggles. The media followed Diana everywhere. She became one of the most photographed women in the world. The Queen, who believed in privacy and duty, watched as her family's problems became global news. She tried to guide her son and support Diana. But the situation worsened. In 1992, Charles and Diana officially separated. That same year, Prince Andrew and his wife, Sarah Ferguson, also separated. Princess Anne divorced her husband. And to make matters worse, a terrible fire damaged Windsor Castle. The year was so difficult that the Queen called it her Annus Horribilis, Latin for horrible year. Through it all, Elizabeth kept working. She continued her weekly meetings with the Prime Minister. She attended events, visited hospitals, spoke to world leaders, and did what she had always done, serve quietly and faithfully. But even she could not stop the growing storm around her family. In 1996, Charles and Diana divorced. A year later, the world was shocked by a tragic event. On August 31, 1997, Princess Diana died in a car crash in Paris. She was only 36 years old. People around the globe were heartbroken. Crowds filled the streets with flowers and messages. Millions wept. But the Queen stayed silent for several days, choosing to remain in Scotland with her grandsons, Princes William and Harry. Some people were angry. They wanted the Queen to speak. They wanted the flag over Buckingham Palace to fly at half-mast. The public felt that the monarchy was cold and out of touch. For one of the only times in her reign, the Queen was criticized by her people. But then, she listened. Queen Elizabeth returned to London. She addressed the nation on live television, something very rare. Her speech was simple and sincere. She said she admired Diana, both as a royal and as a mother. She spoke not just as a queen, but as a grandmother. And with those words, the public's mood began to shift. People saw her humanity. They realized that she, too, was mourning. This period forced the monarchy to evolve. The royal family began to open up more. They allowed cameras inside the palace. They showed more of their daily lives. The Queen agreed to pay taxes on her personal income, something that had not been required before. These steps helped rebuild trust. It wasn't just family matters that challenged the Queen. Britain itself was changing. The country was becoming more diverse, more modern, and more focused on personal freedom. The role of the monarchy was questioned. Some people asked, "Do we still need a queen?" But others said yes, because Elizabeth was not just a figurehead, she was a constant. Through wars, political changes, and social movements, she was always there. She met every U.S. president since Harry Truman, except for Lyndon B. Johnson. She hosted Nelson Mandela after he was freed from prison. She visited China, Russia, and many countries that had once been closed to royal visits. Her presence brought respect and stability. But the 1990s reminded the world that even queens have hearts. Elizabeth was a monarch, yes, but she was also a mother, a grandmother, and a woman facing change. As the century closed, Queen Elizabeth II had weathered one of the most difficult periods of her reign. She had watched the world transform, and she had transformed with it, slowly, quietly, and gracefully. She was no longer just the figure in the crown. She was the anchor of a nation. Chapter 4: Grace in a Changing World, Queen Elizabeth II in the 2000s and 2010s. As the new millennium began, Queen Elizabeth II entered a remarkable phase of her life. Now in her 70s and 80s, she could have chosen to slow down. But instead, she kept going, strong, steady, and committed. The world was changing faster than ever before, and yet the Queen remained a symbol of continuity in a time of rapid transformation. The early 2000s brought both celebration and sorrow. In 2002, Queen Elizabeth marked her Golden Jubilee. 50 years on the throne. Across Britain and the Commonwealth, people celebrated her lifelong service. There were parades, concerts, and street parties. Thousands gathered outside Buckingham Palace to cheer and wave flags. It was a joyful moment, one filled with gratitude and pride. But that same year, the Queen experienced great personal loss. Her sister, Princess Margaret, died in February. Just weeks later, the Queen Mother passed away at the age of 101. Both women had been close to Elizabeth, and their deaths came only days apart. Even in the middle of national celebration, the Queen quietly mourned. Still, she kept her promise of service. In the years that followed, Queen Elizabeth adapted to the modern world in surprising ways. Though known for tradition, she began embracing new technology. She sent her first email in the 1970s, long before most people even knew what email was. In the 2000s, the royal family launched a website. Later, they joined social media. First YouTube, then Twitter, then Instagram. The Queen's Christmas speeches could now be watched online by millions around the globe. Her sense of humor also began to shine in public. In 2012, during the London Olympics, the Queen surprised the world with a short film. It showed her meeting James Bond, played by actor Daniel Craig, at Buckingham Palace. In the video, she appeared to jump from a helicopter and parachute into the stadium. Of course, it was a stunt double, but the world laughed in delight. People were amazed that the Queen had agreed to such a playful moment. It showed that even after decades of rule, she could still surprise us. That same year, 2012, was also her Diamond Jubilee, 60 years as Queen. Once again, the country celebrated. A river pageant was held on the River Thames with over 1,000 boats. People of all ages joined the festivities. For many, she was the only monarch they had ever known. She had guided the nation through so many chapters, always with grace and duty. Family events continued to bring attention. In 2005, Prince Charles married Camilla Parker Bowles. It was a quiet ceremony, different from his first grand wedding. In 2011, the world watched again as Prince William married Catherine Middleton. Their wedding was seen as a fresh, modern moment for the monarchy. The Queen supported them fully. She understood that the younger generation would help shape the future of the royal family. Through wars, global crises, and political shifts, the Queen remained a calm and familiar face. She met with every British Prime Minister, from Winston Churchill to Theresa May and Boris Johnson. Each week, she held private meetings, offering her thoughts and listening carefully. Though she did not share her opinions with the public, her experience gave her deep insight into world affairs. Queen Elizabeth also became a symbol of unity during difficult times. When terrorists attacked London in 2005, killing dozens of people, the Queen responded with quiet strength. She visited hospitals, met with victims, and reminded the nation of its resilience. In times of fear, her presence brought calm. Her health remained strong for much of this time, even as she passed 90 years of age. She continued to ride horses, attend events, and carry out official duties. She often said that being busy kept her going. And while some responsibilities were passed to Prince Charles and other royals, the Queen still held the heart of the nation. In 2015, she became the longest-reigning monarch in British history, surpassing even Queen Victoria. Newspapers around the world praised her endurance, dignity, and commitment. And yet, the Queen herself remained modest. She said, "It is not a record I have ever aspired to. It is simply the result of a long life." Her modesty was part of her magic. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, Queen Elizabeth II became more than just a royal figure. She was a grandmother to the nation. Her sense of duty, her calm leadership, and her gentle humor made her beloved by people of all ages. As the years went by, she continued to evolve with the times, slowly, quietly, but always with purpose. She was not just part of history. She was shaping it. Chapter 5, the final chapter, Queen Elizabeth II's last years and lasting legacy. Welcome to Famous People, English Stories. Ready to level up your English? Here we learn through stories, slow, clear, and fun. Listen, relax, and enjoy the journey. In her final years, Queen Elizabeth II continued to serve her nation and the world with quiet strength and unwavering dignity. Even as she passed her 90s, she remained active and deeply involved in royal duties. But time, as it always does, began to leave its mark. Her movements slowed. Her public appearances became fewer. Yet her mind remained sharp, and her sense of humor never left her. In 2021, the Queen suffered a great personal loss. Her husband, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, died at the age of 99. They had been married for over 73 years, a lifetime of shared duty and quiet love. Their partnership had helped shape the modern monarchy. At his funeral, the Queen sat alone in the chapel, dressed in black, following strict COVID-19 rules. The image touched millions. It showed the world a woman grieving, not just a queen, but a wife who had lost her lifelong companion. Even through that pain, Queen Elizabeth continued her role. That same year, she welcomed new prime ministers, met with world leaders, and delivered her annual Christmas message. Her words that year were soft but powerful: "Grief is the price we pay for love." People around the world connected deeply with her message, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, when so many had lost loved ones. Then came 2022, a year of both celebration and reflection. Queen Elizabeth II became the first British monarch to reach a platinum jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne. It was a moment of history. No other monarch in British history had served so long. Across the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth, people celebrated this incredible milestone. Streets were filled with flags. Children dressed as kings and queens. Thousands attended concerts, exhibitions, and street parties. One of the most unforgettable moments was a light-hearted sketch where the Queen had tea with Paddington Bear. In the video, Paddington offered her a marmalade sandwich, and the Queen, smiling, pulled one out of her handbag. The moment was simple, funny, and completely charming. It showed once again the Queen's gentle humor and her unique ability to connect with people of all ages. But behind the joyful events, her health was declining. She began to attend fewer public functions. At the Platinum Jubilee events, she appeared only a few times, waving from the palace balcony. Each wave carried extra meaning. People knew they were watching history. Some sensed they might not see her again. Then, on September 8, 2022, the news came. Queen Elizabeth II had died peacefully at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. She was 96 years old. The world paused. For over 7 decades, she had been a constant presence. Most people had never known life without her. Her passing marked the end of an era. Across the United Kingdom, people placed flowers outside Buckingham Palace. Many cried. Others stood in silence. Leaders from every continent sent tributes. Buildings were lit in purple and gold. Church bells rang. And in cities across the world, people remembered a queen who had served faithfully, quietly, and with extraordinary grace. Her funeral was watched by billions. It was a state event, filled with ceremony, music, and tradition. But at the heart of it all was a single message: duty. Queen Elizabeth II had kept her promise from 1947. She had dedicated her whole life, long or short, to service. And she had kept that promise to the very end. With her passing, her son became King Charles III. The monarchy continued. But something had changed. A new chapter had begun, and the world would never forget the woman who led with such strength, humility, and calm. Queen Elizabeth's legacy is more than her titles or the years she reigned. It is in the quiet way she faced storms. In the way she brought comfort during crisis. In her ability to change without losing her core. In her deep sense of duty and her calm presence through decades of change. She was not just a queen in name. She was a queen in spirit. A symbol of stability in a shifting world. A reminder that true leadership often speaks in whispers, not shouts. And so, even after her final farewell, her story lives on. In history books. In the hearts of millions. And in the quiet promise she kept from the very start. Thanks for listening to the story of Queen Elizabeth II, a journey through history, leadership, and quiet strength. If you enjoyed learning English through this inspiring story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves English and history too. Want more powerful stories in simple English? Turn on the bell, and you'll never miss a new episode. Keep learning, keep growing, and see you in the next story.